Welcome to the Public Works Nerds Podcast.
Hey nerds, just a couple of quick notes before we start this great episode here about EV charging. We're going to talk a lot about how Edina has implemented chargers throughout their city facilities and such, and helped even install some chargers out in the public space. And then use that infrastructure to support the electrification of a good chunk of their fleet. And it's, really give Edina a lot of credit for being leaders in this area and really pushing the limits on electrifying the fleet and even getting their police officers to like it, which is great. But I want to just also mention that, there are a lot of funding opportunities out there for these chargers. I think most of you that are in the know have heard of the NEVI program, the National Electrical Vehicle Infrastructure program, where the federal government has got literally billions of dollars out there to invest in getting chargers out on these alternative fuel corridors out there. And Minnesota, Iowa, all the states out there and the territories that Bolton Mank is involved in have active solicitations out there for grant funds, and we'd be happy to help you work on those. But there's also other programs, congestion management funds and such, that we can help you point towards applications and such to try to get some funds for you to get some chargers out at your facilities. So I just wanted to add that note that if you're thinking about this and you need some help, maybe need some funding, reach out and we'll help you get there. Even if it's outside of our territory, we'll help you find somebody that can help you do that as well. So thanks and enjoy this episode. Welcome to the Public Works Nerds Podcast, a public works podcast of the nerds, by the nerds, and for the nerds. I'm your host, Mark Culver. As always, thanks for joining us. Today, we're going to talk about electric vehicles as our agencies adapt to the demands of climate change, climate action plans, and other efforts to reduce our carbon footprint. More and more of us are looking at shifting some of our fleet to electric vehicles. But if you've started down this path, it's not as simple as just buying some electric vehicles. Today, we are joined by the City of Edina's Master Electrician and Supervisor, Noah Silver. Noah is helping Edina adapt their infrastructure to support the addition of fully electric vehicles into their fleet. We're going to talk about what that means, some of the challenges are associated with that, and some of the positives of moving to electric vehicles. Welcome, Noah.
Hi. Thanks for having me.
Well, thanks for joining us. It was kind of short notice on this, but I really appreciate you joining us. It was a great idea. I went to a Public Works nerd veteran, Ross Bittner, first and asked him if he wanted to join us, and he handed it off to the city engineer, Chad Milner, and then he said, well, really, you should have Noah on. So here's Noah.
Yeah, and I got to just quick say, Ross was on here prior,
Yep.
Our engineering services manager, and he is totally a public works
Oh,
nerd,
he is.
and I am going to try really hard to try and even follow that lead in from the City of Edina. So
yes, he is. If you look up Public Works nerd in the dictionary, it is a picture of Ross Bittner.
his picture's right there.
Yes,
correct.
And he actually gave me came up with a definition for a public works nerd that I need to work into an episode at some point. So that's a good reminder of that. And Chad, Mr. Milner, one of these days I'm going to get you on one of these podcasts too. So, but thanks again for joining us and on the short notice. But all right, so you're a master electrician.
Yep.
with a government agency. What does that mean? And what do you do as a master electrician for the City of Edina?
Yeah, sure. Well, first of all, I'm surrounded by all these PEs.
Yeah.
PEs everywhere, and now you got the VOTEC kid in here. So, I'm just going to throw that out there. But yeah, so as a master electrician for the City of Edina, we have in-house electricians and HVAC techs. So with state licensing, an employer needs a master electrician to supervise over that electrical work and the licensed electricians. So that's a really big key part of it right there. And so with the City of Edina, it was a little surprise to me, some of the things coming in, because I came from the private sector. I was with a commercial and industrial contractor for about 12 years prior to the City of Edina. And I would say it's more the learning. It took a while to learn the nuances of how government works and just the pieces that are in place to get things done, with the accountability piece being that you are working for the public.
Yeah.
So that was, I would say that was the biggest adjustment for me.
Yeah. So like from a week to week basis, like what kind of projects you're working on and what kind of things are you doing?
Sure. Yeah. So we are in the facilities division of engineering. And as the supervisor of electrical HVAC, it's just that. It's electrical HVAC and plumbing. So I like to say, coordinating the chaos, if you will. So first off, day to day, right? Just the demands, the needs, the things that pop up, service type calls, all that is brought in internally through a ticket system and filtered out to, depending on what type of request it is and who typically handles that. And so my job is to, monitor that and make sure things don't fall through the cracks. And then obviously the field staff providing them the support they need to be able to do that work and do it efficiently and accurately. And then in addition to that, it's also, there's a lot of project based, right? So it's working with basically every department in the city, looking at projects, whether it's a piece of HVAC equipment that's being replaced, or maybe it's a remodel, or maybe it's a brand new building that we're building. Anywhere along that spectrum, it's assisting with technical specifications, working with the engineering firms. I'm almost kind of sometimes like a systems analyst, helping bridge that gap of what does the city want or need out of this project, and then helping relay that to the engineering firms and or the contractors to help get it done. Great. Yeah.
Great. So how long have you been with the city?
Just a little over 9 years now.
Okay. And prior to Edina?
Yeah. So I don't know how far back you want me to go.
So let's go.
I originally was in school for law enforcement because I think this will be fun, and plus it'll give some ammo to the folks that know me that'll be listening. So I was a Paul Blart out at the Mall of America.
Were you?
Yeah. So no.
Were you on the Segway?
No. Everybody asked that. They didn't have them then. So no Segway. Yes, I did sometimes have ice cream while I was walking the halls. Yeah. No. But anyways, so I started out working there while I was going to school for law enforcement, and working there for a little over 4 years, I decided, this isn't my thing. But listening to my father's advice, trade, you should consider trade. So I went to Anoka Hennepin Tech and went through their construction electrician program. And then after that, I had joined the IBEW, it's the Electrical Workers Union Apprenticeship Program, and went through that. So I started my electrical career in 1996, the latter half of it.
Okay.
So just about 28 years now, I've been in this industry. So that's kind of where it started and how I got. So again, after my apprenticeship, I was at a local Twin Cities area here, a commercial industrial contractor, where I dabbled in various roles, from a foreman running work to ultimately going into service work and becoming a service foreman prior to coming to the city of Edina.
So what influenced you to apply for the city of Edina position?
Well, the niche that I had fallen into in the private sector was I took care of about 9 different cities here in the metro area of their electrical needs. So I had been doing a lot with everything from sewer and water type, just maintenance and repairs and upgrades of systems and controls, helping maintain that stuff, to their the city buildings, you name it. And so I ended up doing that for about 10 years of the 12 years I was there. And I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed just meeting the different folks in the city and working on such a varied, type of electrical work kind of across the board like that.
Yeah.
And so when the city of Edina opportunity became available, through all these connections I had with the city, someone made me aware of it, and I thought, I really got to give that a shot. And I'm really glad I did. I really do enjoy it here at the city.
Good. Who do you actually report to? Just out of curiosity.
Yeah, so I report to the facility manager.
Okay.
And that's Derek Otten at the City of Edina. And then again, we are a division of engineering.
Okay.
So we do fall under the director of engineering.
All right.
Yep.
Well, good. So let's shift focus to electric vehicles. So you've been with the city for 9 years, you said, right? So I think that predates the movement to electrifying the fleet.
Yes, it does.
So when did you get involved with that? Like, when did you first hear about this thought about, all right, we're going to bring some electric vehicles in? And what was your initial thought of that and just kind of the progression?
Yeah, so for me, when I came in, they had just a little before I started purchased one Nissan Leaf, the city we had.
Okay.
And they had,
And that's a fully electric, or is that a
yes,
hybrid?
it's
Okay.
a battery electric.
Yep.
Yes. And it had your just what you would call a dumb charging station, right? Just a very simple charging station in the Public Works garage. And that was existing when I arrived. It was in 2018 where we were doing a large addition and remodel of our north parking ramp in the 50th and France district. That was the very first kind of start and station of looking at our EV charging infrastructure expansion and fleet. So we really started dabbling in it as a city, I would say. I'll call it more seriously, starting in 2018. And we installed that first station in the north parking ramp.
What was that first station?
It's a level 2 station.
Okay.
240 volts and 30 amps each port. So.
And that was that just for city vehicles then, or was that a public?
At first, again, the city started dabbling in it. They wanted to get a station in that ramp project.
Yep.
And so it was primarily for public to just kind of start showcasing and getting people to think about and talk about EVs. But obviously then after that, we started shifting towards, we're going to use our fleet and the needs of our fleet to roll it out. So that's, I would say, the one outlier primarily out of our entire inventory that we currently have.
Okay. Is that a ChargePoint charger then?
Yeah, we ultimately decided to utilize the ChargePoint hardware and platform. Yes.
Okay. Any reason why, or were you involved in that?
Yes, I was involved in that as well. We tried another platform. I'll leave the name out because I think it's the right thing to do.
Yeah.
But it just wasn't working for us. And so, without getting into the details of that, we just felt that the ChargePoint platform provided what we needed to help us juggle fleet and public and be able to kind of interchange the two and have some flexibility there. Because in the beginning, I don't know that we fully knew exactly what direction it was going to completely go.
Right.
You're just starting out and you have your theories, and then as time goes on, and it's not like from 2018 to now EVs haven't changed.
Right.
We've got a ton to talk about that as well.
Right, just the charger type,
so
or
yeah,
the cable, the
and
connectors.
what's the technology going to be, and where are we going, and how are batteries, and the on and on and on. So that's the one big benefit to a platform like that, is you truly do have some flexibility. Yeah.
Good. So, and just to kind of touch on that a little bit more, I know enough about this to be dangerous, but I know there's a lot to be thought about, to consider as far as setting rates, and figuring out how much are you being charged for that energy, and then demand charges and this, that, and the other. So were you involved in some of that as far as figuring out how much to actually charge the public for the use of this?
I'll say it this way, yes and no.
Yeah.
Because with the Public Utility Commission, my understanding is we can't charge for power, and I'm not well versed in that. So it's definitely something that legal you need to look into. What we decided, and when I say we, I should probably point this out, it would be the sustainability manager, myself, and the director of engineering kind of are where these little kind of organized thoughts start, and when we look to expand. And then obviously several other players within the city, depending on what departments involved with the fleet get in it. But with that being said, early on, we were looking at it more as we don't charge the public to use them directly. What we wanted to do is, again, promote EVs and promote going towards electric vehicles. So with that, we allow 2 hours and 15 minutes. We put a buffer in there where it's free.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And then after that, it's $6 an hour. And that's just to get people to move on and self-police it, because the signs do say 2 hours is the time limit. Now, obviously, our fleet, it's unlimited. And we find that it works really well, because the $6 was picked because we figured for a long time, financially, it just won't make sense for people to plug in and stay there for that amount of time. So again, the fee is more to self-police the stations and get people to properly rotate through. And as far as charging for it, again, I don't believe we actually can charge for energy use.
Yeah, I think that depends on what funds you use to purchase the chargers.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's obviously a consideration as agencies are looking to fund these chargers, and that is what limitations are on that. So how many chargers does the City of Edina have out there for public use now?
Well, we have a total of 38 ports.
Okay.
And out of those, I would say about roughly half of them are accessible to the public.
Got it. Have you installed any fast chargers yet?
Not yet.
Okay.
We have in our CIP to put a 200 kilowatt hour DC fast charging station down at our public works, kind of by our fuel dispensing area, because we're getting to that point with our fleet. But again, that's close. We're just securing the other half of the funding for it. Yeah.
So yeah, I think we're going to jump back and forth between some of the technical aspects of these chargers that you're putting in and some of the challenges in that, and talk about the fleet. But let's move back to the fleet side. So you said you started with the Nissan Leaf in 2018 or so, or prior.
It was a little prior, a little before that. Yeah.
So tell us about how your electric fleet has expanded since then.
Oh my, yeah. I just looked today actually, because I was like, I'm pretty sure our fleet operations supervisor just acquired a couple other, and we're at 21 vehicles.
Wow.
Yeah, and all of them are battery electric except for 4 of them. 4 of them are plug-in hybrids.
Okay.
So we've really expanded. It started out with a couple of vehicles, and now we're really, I guess, trucking along. What the city has decided is half-ton pickup trucks and down is where we're looking as we replace vehicles to go battery electric, and
by default.
Yeah. And if by chance there isn't that option available, then it's looking for a plug-in hybrid.
Yep.
And then obviously the next tier is just a hybrid, and it's only if you exhaust all that then we look at an actual internal combustion engine or an ICE vehicle.
Yeah. So the 4 plug-in hybrids that you have, what are they, and do you know why you have those plug-in hybrids?
Yeah. So the Mitsubishi Outlanders, that's 3 of the 4.
Good,
and then
good vehicles.
And then the 4th one is a Chrysler Pacifica.
Oh, really?
Minivan.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah. So the minivan, that was to replace the minivan that our IT department has, in order to get around the city with doing their desktop support type stuff with equipment. And so they really wanted another minivan. And at the time, based on their needs, working with our fleet operations supervisor and our sustainability manager, that's what made sense.
Good.
So that we do that too when we look at vehicle replacements. The stakeholders that are actually going to be using the vehicle in that department, it's really important that they have input in it, because if you want to have this be successful, you really need to have everybody, have their input and really be comfortable with the decision so that they're supportive of it. And it's what really helps move our fleet forward, because you do get some folks that are maybe a little apprehensive of going battery electric. So
Yeah.
really good thing to do. And then the Mitsubishi Outlanders, those 2 of them went to our liquor operations.
Oh.
They're used as delivery vehicles.
Okay, that makes sense that you'd want something that you'd have a kind of a backup range on.
Correct. Short range, they're doing deliveries. They can plug in overnight for long periods of time. They can run virtually battery electric a majority of the time. And also when they were purchased, it was earlier on when you just didn't really have a lot of options for a vehicle like that as well. So that was the main reason I would say why we had them. And same with the third one, which went to engineering for engineering tech for out in the field for site inspections and whatnot. And again, it was, I believe, mostly because at the time it was more in the beginning before we had Ford and everybody else starting to build the vehicles.
Yeah. When I was at Roseville, we had a similar situation. We were replacing a vehicle that our utility superintendent used, and I really was eager to dive into some sort of electrification, at some level, and so we kind of looked at it, and I was actually surprised at how cost competitive the Mitsubishi was, and this is probably 2019, 2020, I think.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
But we didn't want to go full electric, partly because of the cost, partly because of the type of vehicle that was available, partly also because of some range anxiety issues, because he was driving to conferences or something like that occasionally and using that vehicle. So it was a really good choice for us. But it was, I enjoyed, I got to drive that every once in a while, and I enjoyed checking out all the stats on it and everything. But good vehicle. So you mentioned you have 21 vehicles, so you don't have to go through each one of them, but just maybe talk about some of the other types of vehicles you have in that fleet.
So we have quite a few. We have a good bulk of Ford Lightnings.
Okay. That's awesome.
Yeah, and where we're using those, I believe we have 8 of them actually.
Wow.
So 3 of them I think that most people find really interesting are in the police department.
Yeah.
And they're fully decked out, fully marked squad cars. And they're used on 12-hour shifts for patrolling the streets of Edina, and so far the police officers are really liking them. They complain about the turning radius, but it's a pickup truck.
Yeah.
But they've been running them through their paces, and for city use with a lot of stop and go, they're going through a 12-hour shift with those Ford Lightnings without a problem, and they don't have to recharge them at all during their shift.
Wow.
Yeah.
What is the range on those?
I know it varies, but roughly you're just under 300 miles.
Okay.
It's about 280 or 90 miles, I believe, under good conditions. I'll call it optimum. And in the winter, the very first Lightning they got, they left it outside unplugged overnight in the sub-zero, because if you have some fleet vehicles and you might have a couple challenges, it's not that big of a deal. You have other vehicles fall back on, but when you start using it for emergency services, it just simply has to work.
Yep.
So they really did a good job of just verifying that it met their needs, and it did. And so they purchased 2 more, and so now they're up to 3, and they've got an order in for the new Chevy Blazer police packages as well. So they're going to try and acquire 2 of those as well. They did try a Mach-E. It was physically too small. It just for the gear you needed and the separation for if you have a person in the back, it didn't work. So they repurposed that to more of a support role and admin. But so that's
what I want. I want one of those Mach-E's.
Yeah, they're pretty nice. With my job, I will say I always have to check every vehicle out, right?
Yeah, right.
And take it for a
good
spin.
test drive.
Yeah, it's part of my job. I have to do it. So and then we have other Lightnings. We have one in Public Works that's used in the Parks and Rec. Again, we're not in that timing where we need the other half-ton pickups replaced, but as we do, that'll be a high probability of what they're replaced with. And just recently, 4 are going to fire.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. Yep. So for fire inspections.
Yeah.
So and then the other big bulk we would have would be. We have 5 Hyundai Konas that we just received this year.
Okay.
And those are going to like building and inspections type positions, things like that. And so far, the employees really like them. They're roomy, and they work really well for what they're doing.
I was wondering about with the pickups. Have you, from the public works perspective, have you done any testing with plowing on any of those yet?
No, I don't believe they're rated for that.
Okay.
Typically you're looking at 3/4, 1 ton and up, right, for plowing.
Okay.
So I don't even know that Ford would, they even have a setup for that. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Well, good. So you've mentioned fire, you've mentioned police, you mentioned public works, you mentioned inspections, which is awesome to see such a wide implementation of the electrification. But obviously, that's going to, all of those vehicles are being parked in different places.
Mm-hmm.
So talk about maybe the challenges of setting up your facilities now, your parking spots, your parking ramps, your garages, what have you, to charge these vehicles.
Yeah. So that's how we approach this is, again, it's primarily the three of us at the very beginning. It's myself, the sustainability manager, and
Who's your sustainability manager? Let's name drop.
Marissa Baer.
All right.
Yeah. So she just joined us recently from CEE. And so really, really glad to have her. She really knows her stuff. And then Richard Poppets is the fleet operations supervisor who acquires the vehicles. And so working with the various departments, when Richard has vehicles that are up for renewal, he'll obviously connect with Marissa and whoever's responsible in that department for procuring the vehicles and go through options. And they, again, following what I stated earlier, look for a battery electric option.
Yep.
And then once that's been kind of pinned down, then I get brought into the process about what types of vehicles and the quantities and obviously where they're going to be. And then that's where I start my site assessment. And that's where, with my background, I go in and I look at that specific site, look at the service, look at the distribution, the electrical distribution of that building or site, and determine what needs to be done to meet the charging needs of what's headed that way. And then from there, I come up with a plan, a design, and work with internal staff and contractors to get them installed. Obviously we have to order then, so I work with Marissa on figuring out what equipment we're going to order and then get that ordered. And we also have a unique process where I believe Ross talked about last time when you guys were talking. We have that CAS fund where we have money set aside to help with our initiative to lower our carbon emissions. So long story short, the police want to buy a new squad car. Say a battery electric is roughly $10,000 or $15,000 more, plus you need to purchase some charging infrastructure. The CAS fund will pick up that difference.
Oh, okay. That's great.
That way, these folks in these other departments, they don't have to feel that strain with their budgets, and it's a way for the city to move this forward.
Yeah.
In a fairly equitable way with the various departments.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Can you run us through maybe an example of one of the buildings that you did that, site review on and analysis? And because when we were talking earlier or prior to this, there are some considerations for, if you did want to charge all the vehicles at the same time, that might exceed the load capacity of your panel or what have you, or even the service to the building. But there's some ways to manage that. So just kind of talk about an exple of one of the buildings.
I think a great example would be the Public Works garage, because we can hit all of that, what you were just highlighting there. First of all, we decided in a central location in the garage. Again, you've got to be collaborative. You get all the stakeholders involved, especially when you're moving people's cheese. So we settled on a central area of the garage, a bank of 8 spaces where It would be easy to move people around from their different areas and groups and have that be where we start rolling it out. And then from there, I basically looked at it and said, okay, we need 8 ports, here. And with the ChargePoint system at the time, because they've come out with some new products, they have a fleet charging station that's smart, that's connected, that can do up to 50 amps of load, which is pretty decent amount for a level 2. 80 amps is the current maximum for the standard.
Hey everyone, I just want to take a quick moment to thank our sponsor, Bolton & Mink, who is producing and editing our podcasts.
At Bolton & Mink, we believe all people should live in a safe, sustainable, and beautiful community. We promise every client 2 things. We'll work hard for you, and we'll do a good job. We take a personal interest in the work being done around us. And at the end of the day, we're real people offering real solutions.
So I don't know how nerdy. Well, this is
It's
for the nerds.
Let's go.
So the
Dive in.
maximum power for a level 2 is 19.2 kW. That's the max.
Yeah, that's
right?
the most
That's
that the
power.
vehicle will accept, right?
It depends on the vehicle.
Yeah.
So here's another little nerd thing. Sorry, sidetrack. We got to go on.
Yeah.
Level 1, level 2. We don't really say level 3 anymore. We say DC fast charge, right? Level 1 is 120 volts. Okay, AC. Level 2 is 240 or 208 volt because we have commercial services, single phase, right? Up to 80 amps. It can be anywhere. Usually you don't typically see it lower than 20 amps, all the way up to 80 amps, right? So that's level 1, 2, and 3. So with that, on these vehicles, they have an onboard energy management system, and it has its own charger. So these level 1 and 2 stations that you see, they're not chargers. They're just a smart AC switch that plugs into the car. They communicate, and the car, all it's doing is telling that switch to send me AC power. And then on board the car is the actual charger, and that's where it takes the AC and rectifies it to DC.
Really?
To inject the DC into the battery and charge it up. So the point being is that when you purchase an electric vehicle, you need to look at the specifications of that specific vehicle to see what the onboard charging capacity is. Because if you were to say, well, I'm going to put in a 80 amp level 2, so I have that 19.2 kW of capacity, but your onboard charging of the vehicle is only good for around 7,000, that's all you're going to get. It just simply can't.
And so then you've wasted that additional 20 amps or whatever.
Correct. Right? And it might be the difference between upgrading your service or not. So you really, this kind of now we're kind of swerving back towards getting to what you asked me to talk about with the design and the site assessment. Just for a quick wrap up though, but then on DC fast charging, how that works is the charger is outside of the car now. And you're actually outside of the car at that charging station. You're taking the AC and rectifying it to DC, and you're injecting it you're coupling it directly to the car. The car is still regulating that DC current flow. However, it's not converting it in the car anymore. But you're still limited to what the car is designed for.
Yeah.
So you could pull up to, right now, 350 kW is about the high end of the standard for DC fast charging right now. That is going up, but that's pretty typical for the upper level. The lower level is 50 kW. Anyhow, your car, like a Chevy Bolt, is only good for 50 kW. Yeah. But then you get into like a Mach-E, it can do 150 kW. So again, you got to be careful, and you have to look at your specific vehicle when you look at it.
What will the Ford Lightning do?
Oh boy, you just asked me.
You got me.
I got to
try to stump you.
You stumped me. I want to say they're 150, but
okay.
I don't know if the newer ones are higher capacity.
Right.
Don't quote me on that one though.
Yeah.
So with all that, now back to the public works. So we have these 8 spots. So at the time, makes sense. We're going to do the 50 amp draw. So it'd be a 60 amp circuit.
Yep.
And then, but here's the thing. We're a fleet. These vehicles are going to plug in at the end of the day and have all night to charge. So are they all going to be pulling that 50 amps at the same time or need to? No.
Right.
So what I do is I sprinkle in, how I describe it is, I need to design this where I'm not under engineering it and not over engineering it. And it's a balance. And I'm also guessing, because where are we going to be in the future?
Right.
How are we going to acquire more fleet vehicles? What kind are they going to be? So it still is a little bit up in the air, and we're taking a little bit of risk. So I really try to do the best I can with balancing all this. And so what I did here, and this is, again, PW Nerd Podcast, I ran a separate feeder from our 480 volt service out to a transformer that we hung up in the bar joists above, 75 kW transformer. So we have a 225 amp 208 three-phase panel down below. And then from there, we put in these 8 single-phase 60 amp circuits. Now, for those of you that are the nerds and you're checking my rough math, we're slightly over double the actual capacity of that panel. So how do I do it? This is where the smart charging comes in. We use energy management. So because these are smart stations and they all communicate, I program in what the actual capacity of the panel is and what the capacity is of each one of these stations, and it tracks which exact circuit breaker they're on, so what line of the panel they're on, and it coordinates all that automatically.
Wow.
So so that way, again, you're not under engineering, but you're not over engineering, and you can do more reasonable installs when you have all these tools at your disposal to kind of piece it together.
So just out of curiosity, you've got how many of those electric vehicles do you have in the Public Works garage right now?
Right now we have 4 of the 8. Yes.
All right. So then you've got capacity to expand for another 4 vehicles. How many total vehicles do you have in your Public Works garage?
Vehicles that are currently, I'll call it eligible to go to battery electric. I don't know the number. If I had to put a rough guess on it, it's probably more like around 30-ish, I would say.
So obviously if in 10, 15 years, if you're successful in electrifying your complete fleet there, at least the eligible vehicles, you're going to be adding some more services.
Well, 15 years I'll be retired.
Yeah, so. It'll be somebody else's problem.
Yeah, it's not my problem. So next question.
Yeah.
No, you're right. So, but here's the thing. So those 8 that I selected, also there's 2 off to the side. So really you could have up to 10 vehicles parked without having to move them.
Yep.
That's the other thing I did. We decided to double up on the ends. It was a really good spot for that reason. So really we have 10 spots where you can park vehicles, not have to juggle them around, and they can all have access to a port.
Yeah.
So really we're good for that. On top of that, again, with the way the fleets go and how much the vehicles will be driven, there's going to be some level of, we don't need them all sitting in that spot, maybe charging overnight all the time. Some of these vehicles might only need to charge every other day or every couple of days.
That's a good point.
So with some coordination that shouldn't be too complicated, we could have auxiliary spots that don't have ports somewhere where we can just simply switch vehicles out. Maybe somebody at the end of their day comes in and parks in the non-port, spot, and then that leaves, whatever. But there's a lot of room for that as well.
Yeah.
But then obviously the next step would be to find another bank and do it all over again.
Right.
Yeah.
So moving beyond the electric service and such, we've been talking about eligible vehicles, vehicles that have a common sense pair on the electric side. But what about, looking ahead? I mean, a year ago is when Ross and I had that, short conversation about this, and we talked about sweepers, for instance. And it's like, well, right now it just doesn't make sense for us. Has that math changed at all for you guys? Have you started talking about other more maybe heavy equipment that might be eligible?
It's still kind of out there. That's again subjective, but in my opinion as well, what Ross said, I think we're still kind of in that area with it. However, there is a fire vehicle.
Yeah.
Rosenbauer. Yeah. Locally here, it's basically it's an electric fire truck, but it has a range extender, which is a 6-cylinder diesel engine. So It's a pumper truck, like a pumper rescue truck, that has the capacity in most scenarios for most of the day. Most days it can run 100% battery electric, but it gets stuck on that one fire call or whatever where it has to pump. Then it has that range extender to keep it going. I know we've looked at that. I've seen the specs on it and it's being reviewed. I don't want to misspeak, but I think there's a chance that that might be seen in the city here in the sometime in the future.
Yeah, I know Roseville was, I watched a couple council meetings after I left Roseville where their fire department was making a pitch for their budget process last year for that electric fire truck. And I can't remember where it ended up, but I wouldn't be surprised if they've got one on order in Roseville, trying to be the first agency in Minnesota to have an electric fire truck. But the diesel range extender, so one of the, and this is one of my questions for you, is like what are the advantages of electrical vehicles completely, overall? But with this diesel range extender, is there a separate combustion engine on there, or is a diesel like generator just charging the batteries to extend the range of the batteries?
It's a range extender.
Yeah.
When I say that, what I mean is the diesel engine is not coupled to the drivetrain.
Yeah.
The engine, the ICE engine, is simply a generator to produce electricity to go to the electric motors and the battery. Correct. So it is an EV. It is an electric vehicle. So by definition, an EV is any vehicle where the prime mover is an electric motor.
Yeah.
Right. So our locomotives that you see going down, right, pulling freight, they're EVs. They're electric vehicles. There is that diesel you hear and see chugging out of it is a huge generator that makes electricity. The train itself moves on electric motors. And kind of into one of your questions there, and that's why I believe with our current technology, that's the way to move stuff. It's way more efficient. You have way less moving parts mechanically, and the torque is virtually unlimited.
Yeah.
That's why freight cars use it. It's pretty hard to argue that. So again, with an EV, you're looking at 70 to 90% efficiency overall.
Wow.
From the time you produce the electricity at the power plant, transmit it on the line with line losses, transformers stepping that voltage down, the conversion I described earlier with the charging with the vehicle and all that, and then getting it to the wheels and moving the vehicle, you're depending 70 to 90%. What's a nice vehicle? You're lucky if it's 25%. So aside from all the other noise you might hear, just that alone is the big reason why we really need to do this.
That's interesting. I love that concept of pairing because in an emergency situation, you may not be able to recharge a vehicle before you need it. So having that ability to use a gas generator, and we've all used gas generators for various things,
sure,
whether it's just camping or powering your home or whatever. But just to have that as a backup to provide that electricity and not necessarily power the vehicle through combustion, but just provide the electricity.
Yeah. Well, and that engine, when it does have to run, it's going to run a lot more efficiently. Yeah. Because it's a constant load, so there's still a benefit there in reducing the carbon emissions and being more efficient, so it's still viable,
just going a little bit out of your expertise maybe, but going outside of the city operations for electric charging of vehicles, maybe what do you know about the overall electrical infrastructure that we have and that we need, and the challenges that like Excel is going to face in meeting the demand if every garage in the Twin Cities had an EV vehicle in it?
Yeah, this is an area that through the industry that I'm in that we talk about, it's kind of a loaded question, but some big chunks to take out of it. First of all, different regions of the country have different challenges with the grid. We've seen it. You get out to California, they have a lot of challenges that we don't see here. So, focusing here on Minnesota, let's keep it more on a regional kind of thing to digest here. I honestly think we're going to be okay, with the scenario you're describing. Now, when you get into fleet where you're talking about dock trucks and you've got hundreds of them, that is an issue. Yeah. And I don't know what the answer is. And I don't know what we're going to have to do, what's going to need to be innovated to tackle that, because that is, how do you have a couple hundred dock trucks? You're going to have half of them out of commission?
Right.
I don't know.
Right.
But with the garages and folks at home, I think it is manageable. And the reason why is this stuff's connected. You go to a gas station right now, you have no idea how much fuel is in those underground tanks. All you know is their business hours, and that when you go there and you pump fuel into your tank, you're going to get gas. Yeah. And that's all you know. You know nothing else. With the EVs and with smart charging, and we didn't even talk about bi-directional charging.
Right.
And people are putting solar on their homes and other energy generation. Think about this. Tesla has their battery walls, right?
Yep.
People are putting them in your garage. Why can't your EV be a battery wall? It can. And for an example, I know we talked about earlier prior to the podcast, with that Ford Lightning, you can get a bi-directional charging station for your home and an inverter similar to what you'd have if you had a solar array. And you can basically backfeed 80 amps at 240 into your home. And a Ford Lightning, let's round it to 100 kilowatt hours. How long can a person operate their home on 100 kilowatt hours? A long time, days. And if you're talking about a peak period in the evening, that's maybe 4 hours. That can help buffer the demand on the grid. And then when it's off peak, then you can recharge it. So again, without going too deep into the weeds, you start thinking of things like that, coupled with solar on your roof, other types of renewables and other energy sources. I can see the grid going to more of a regional level and kind of micro in little areas like that, where maybe it won't be quite as bad as people think.
Yeah, that's really interesting when you talk about, when it first talked about that, like, why the hell would you ever have your car power your house? But it makes sense. It's particularly when you talk about managing your own home's consumption of energy. Yeah. And, trying to, only pull the energy off of the grid in the off-peak hours and the low demand.
Yeah, and a lot of the utilities, they'll give you a lot lower rate if you do it off peak, and then so during the on peak, if you shed during that, you could save a lot of money.
That's interesting. So what's the as we get to the end of the podcast here, what do you see as, like, and maybe whatever conversations you've had at Edina about, like, what are your next steps on for expanding your fleet or just kind of managing that? Like, what do you see in the future here?
Yeah, I think right now it's pretty much we're staying the course of what I described. I think I don't have the timeline, but I think when you get into those heavier duty vehicles, it's not quite there yet. So we're really focusing on that half ton and below right now. And I see us doing that for a while yet. Not to say that we won't entertain some of the other equipment that's coming out. The fire truck we talked about, our brand new fire station 2 that is currently under construction. We specified out load on the service for DC fast charging there. Specifically looking at potentially for electric vehicle equipment at the fire station, and not talking Lightnings, but fire trucks. So we built that infrastructure in with the new building. So we're not going to lose sight of that either when we have those opportunities. But I think that's kind of where we're at. And so as far as adding stations and expanding, that's going to flow with where the vehicles are expanding, what department, what area of the city.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's great. What's your favorite electric vehicle you've driven?
That's a hard one. I have two. I really enjoy the Ford Lightnings. Yeah. And I also enjoy, I drove a Tesla Model Y.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, performance. And I thought that was a lot of fun, too.
Yeah.
Yeah. We don't have a Tesla in Edina. That was just a friend of mine. So,
Yeah.
but yeah.
Yeah, I think Eden Prairie has been using they've tried out some Teslas for their police vehicles as well. But what electric vehicle do you want that you've seen that you want to drive?
That I want to drive?
Yeah.
For me personally, and not towards work, right now, I was intrigued by the Mach-E. I enjoyed driving it, and I think for me, for more of a practical vehicle, it'd be something like that right now.
Yeah.
And I don't know, have you ever tried one pedal driving in these?
I did. I rented a Tesla
Yeah.
on a spring break trip once, and I did, and it's really weird getting used to that, where it's
never
basically
touching
braking.
the brake.
Right.
Yeah.
And it especially when you're coming up to an intersection or something, you're just like, whoa.
It seems wrong.
It does.
Seems like an accident waiting to happen.
Yeah, but I kind of liked it. It takes a little bit of time to get used to it, but I liked it.
Yeah, and that's I really enjoy doing that in the city driving, where it's a lot of stop and go.
Yep.
But yeah, I would say those right now are the vehicles, but there's so many that are coming. What I'm excited about is I don't need a vehicle personally right now yet, but I'm going to for sure in about summer, fall of 25, maybe stretch it into the beginning of 26. And by then I think there's going to be a lot more options out there. So
are you for sure going to go all electric?
I'd say there's a high probability
Yeah.
of it. It really depends on where the pricing's at. Right now, I have a hard time paying $40,000 for a Nissan Leaf that gets 200 miles of range because they do the base model and then they do the whole deal. It's one or the other, right? And so I think that needs to be tempered a little more, where I
have some more options.
Yeah, I think, so that's personally what I need to see.
Yeah, I've been debating that. It's probably going to be a while before we're buying a new vehicle, but I'm going back and forth between all electric and a plug-in hybrid. But we'll definitely have at least a plug-in hybrid.
Vehicle. That's where my household is at, right? My wife and I, with the kids, I see us for a while yet having an internal combustion engine vehicle as one, and then again, when I'm ready for this next round, having an EV for more of our around town and just going out, running errands, things like that, commuting. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, cool. Well, anything else you want to talk about or mention or anything?
Gee, I don't know. There's so much we could have talked about with this. It's like
tons,
but no, I really enjoyed it. And it's just, I really do enjoy talking about EVs. Being an electrician, it's electrons. That's my jam.
Yeah.
So I do get pretty excited about it. I had to hold myself back because I can't hold a candle to Ross. So
it is tough to compete with Ross's nerddom.
Yes. Is that a word, nerddom?
We're making it up.
I love it. I love it. Yeah, I love it.
Well, great. Well, again, Noah, thank you very much for joining us and giving us some background on electric vehicles. And hopefully our nerds out there have found this useful and we'll do something with it. And that's the charge here, is no pun intended. That's the charge to our listeners and to the agencies out there, is start thinking about what vehicles can you electrify. And there's clearly savings out there from fuel.
We didn't even get to that.
Right. Yeah. Just the cost savings,
maintenance, everything.
But maintenance is huge.
Yes.
No more oil changes.
No.
Just all the fluids and everything that you're not taking care of.
Yes.
The wear and tear, the belts,
wear parts,
and blah blah
yes.
blah.
We needed more time.
Right. Maybe next time we'll break down the differences. We'll really nerd out and get into the mechanical differences.
Get Richard
between an electric
in
engine and a combustion engine. But again, thanks, Noah.
Yeah.
And to all the nerds out there, thank you for joining us on this episode, and really hope you've enjoyed it and found some value. And if so, make sure you tell your nerd colleagues to listen into this and other episodes. Until next time, nerds out.